The scent of burning garlic is distinct. It lacks the rich, savory depth of proper caramelization and instead hits the back of the throat with a harsh, acrid sting. The delicate sugar compounds break down into pure carbon, leaching a bitter residue that ruins whatever dish it touches. I smelled it the exact moment I pushed through the heavy double doors of the community center's instructional kitchen. My general manager at Lumina had made the parameters clear that morning. The landlord of our commercial building sat on this community outreach board. Our lease renewal was due in 10 days. If I skipped this volunteer amateur cooking class, our kitchen lost the building. I didn't argue. I didn't complain about the schedule. I simply packed my knife roll. The noise level in the room was highly inefficient. The erratic clattering of cheap aluminum pans, the nervous, high-pitched laughter of people who didn't know what they were doing, and the violent hiss of improperly heated oil. I stood at the back of the room, adjusting the cuffs of my dark, tailored shirt, and scanned the 15 portable induction stations. For the past 3 years, I had chased industry accolades until food became nothing but a spreadsheet of profit margins, food costs, and critical reviews. An hour ago, I had stood at my own pass, inspecting a plate of visually flawless venison carpaccio. It was mathematically perfect. It also made me feel absolutely nothing. I hated chaos, but the sterile perfection of my own life was beginning to feel like a vault. My attention narrowed on Station 4. The woman standing there was fighting a losing battle against a skillet of sautéed wild mushrooms. She was wearing a pristine white apron over a dark, professional blouse, her blonde hair escaping a loose metal clip at the back of her neck. Her spatula scraped aggressively against the Teflon coating of the pan, her movements frantic and rushed. I recognized her immediately. Gwendolyn Peterson. She owned the Copper Spoon, a small bistro, struggling to stay consistent directly across the street from my restaurant. I walked over to her station, smoothly navigating around a man in a plaid shirt who was dangerously close to severing his own thumb with a dull paring knife. The heat radiating from Gwendolyn's burner was entirely too high. The oil was at its smoke point. "Your pan is smoking, Gwendolyn," I said, keeping my voice low, ensuring the rest of the room couldn't hear the critique. "You're scorching the alliums." She jumped slightly, her wooden spoon clattering loudly against the metal edge of the stove. She looked at me, her dark eyes wide, a stark streak of white flour marking her jawline. "Enzo," she breathed, her posture instantly rigid and defensive. "I know it's hot. I'm trying to get a hard sear on the mushrooms before they release their internal moisture into the pan." "You achieve a proper sear with high heat and an uncrowded pan," I explained, stepping beside her to closely inspect the thermal damage. I didn't take the spoon from her hand. I reached down and smoothly rotated the cheap plastic dial, dropping the induction heat to a controlled, steady medium setting. "You have crowded the pan. The moisture has nowhere to evaporate. You are currently boiling them in their own liquid, while simultaneously burning the minced garlic at the edges. The sugar content can't withstand this temperature." She stared at the pan. The aggressive, violent hissing subsided into a steady, manageable sizzle. The harsh, bitter smell began to dissipate, slowly replaced by the earthy, grounded aroma of the mushrooms actually cooking in the butter. "A little less heat," I added, allowing a small, dry note of humor to enter my normally flat voice, "and you avoid turning dinner into charcoal." She rolled her eyes, but her grip on the wooden spoon finally loosened. "Fine. You're right. I'm rushing. I'm just trying to get through the steps. Cooking is a strict science of timing and thermal transfer, not speed," I noted. "Why are you taking a beginner's culinary class? You own a functional restaurant." She looked away, focusing entirely on stirring the now salvageable mushrooms, sliding them carefully to the cooler edge of the pan to let the center breathe. Owning a restaurant and knowing how to run a commercial line are two entirely different skill sets. My head chef quit 3 days ago. He walked out during the middle of the lunch rush because of a supplier dispute over seafood pricing. I'm trying to figure out how to cover the line myself until I can hire a permanent replacement. The data shifted. I instantly recalibrated my assessment of her. She wasn't just a careless owner playing at hospitality. She was desperate, trying to physically plug a hole in a sinking ship with her own hands. "Who is running your dinner service tonight?" I asked, scanning the room to ensure no one was eavesdropping on her operational failure. "Harper. My morning prep cook. It's not going well." She texted me 10 minutes ago. Ticket times are pushing 45 minutes for standard appetizers. Before I could formulate a structural response to that nightmare, her phone buzzed loudly on the stainless steel prep counter. The screen lit up with a notification from a local social media page. I didn't mean to read it, but my vision is trained to catch incoming data quickly. It was a public post from Julian Vance, a local food blogger who fancied himself a ruthless, elite critic. He had a documented, malicious history of targeting independent kitchens during transition periods, destroying their reputations for internet traffic. The post read, "Hearing massive rumors of an exodus at the Copper Spoon. If the kitchen is as chaotic as the dining room, I'll be dropping by tonight to document the collapse in real time. Stay tuned." Gwendolyn stared at the illuminated screen. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her pale under the harsh fluorescent lights of the community center. She looked at the pan of mushrooms, then back at the phone, the crushing reality of the impending threat settling heavily over her. Julian's review could trigger a localized boycott. It could bankrupt her small bistro within a month. "He's coming tonight," she whispered, her voice fracturing. The wooden spoon finally slipped from her fingers, resting against the edge of the pan. "I have a junior prep cook trying to execute a Friday dinner service for a hostile critic. It's an absolute slaughter." I looked at her hands. They were trembling slightly against the edge of the counter. My own kitchen across the street demanded my absolute focus. Tonight was Friday. The weekend rush at Lumina was brutal, requiring my total bandwidth. If my investors found out I abandoned the line to help a competitor, I would have to justify every single minute to the board. I looked at Gwendolyn. She wasn't quitting. She was terrified, breathing shallowly, but she was still standing at the stove, refusing to walk away. I was doing it anyway. "I finished my final quality pass at Lumina at 6 o'clock, I stated, pulling my gaze away from her and back to the burner, checking the caramelization on her mushrooms. "I will cross the street at 6:15. I will expedite your service tonight to get you through Julian's visit, but only if you want me there. If you say no, I walk away, no hard feelings." Her eyes widened in absolute shock, darting to my face to see if it was a joke. "Enzo, you can't do that. Your investors would have a stroke." "A rising tide lifts all boats," I replied, reaching out and turning off her burner entirely, concluding the lesson, and I refuse to let a blogger who profits from chaos destroy a kitchen that simply needs proper structural management to survive. She stared at me, the rigid, panicked tension in her jaw relaxing, replaced by a cautious, highly fragile hope. "Okay. Yes, please. Turn your mushrooms out onto a paper towel to drain the excess oil," I instructed, stepping back from her station to reestablish a professional distance. "I will see you at 6:15. At exactly 1,815 hours, the kitchen of the Copper Spoon was the disaster I had anticipated. The air was thick with heavy humidity and the slightly burnt, lingering smell of old fry oil that desperately needed to be changed. The ticket printer was aggressively churning out orders, the white paper trailing down from the machine, pooling onto the grease-stained red tile floor like a white flag of surrender. Harper, the young line cook, was frantically attempting to plate 3 different, highly complex dishes simultaneously, while a massive pan of wild mushroom risotto aggressively boiled over on the back stove, splashing starchy liquid onto the open flames. Gwendolyn was standing near the pass, trying to verbally organize the incoming chaos, her hair pulled back tightly, a smear of yellow hollandaise sauce on the crisp collar of her shirt. I walked through the heavy swinging doors, letting them shut behind me. "Pause hands off the heat for 10 seconds, I said. My voice wasn't a yell. It was a firm, grounded directive, carrying the heavy, resonant authority of a man who spent 12 hours a day controlling fire, steel, and human panic. Harper froze instantly, stepping back from the stove. Gwendolyn spun around, her shoulders instantly dropping an inch the second she saw me. I walked directly to the ticket rail. I wasn't wearing my pristine white executive chef's coat. I was in a plain black t-shirt and dark denim jeans, my sleeves rolled up past my elbows, revealing the faint burn scars on my forearms. I pulled the long, chaotic trail of paper from the machine and ripped it cleanly against the metal edge. I quickly scanned the orders, organizing the raw data in my mind, instantly prioritizing the fire times by protein thickness. Give me 3 minutes, I said, my tone completely even. I'll rebuild the flow. I have 6 tables waiting out there, Harper stammered, her eyes darting nervously toward the dining room doors. 3 minutes of prep now saves 30 minutes of failure later, I replied, stepping up to the line beside her. I turned to Gwendolyn. Julian is in the dining room? Table 4, she confirmed, pointing toward the front of the house. He ordered the braised short rib and the scallop risotto, the 2 most timing-sensitive items we have. The components are sound, I announced, rapidly pulling open the heavy stainless steel doors of the lowboy refrigerator to assess the mise en place. Her previous chef had left her in a bind, but her ingredient sourcing was flawless. We just need execution, I said, shutting the lowboy with my knee. Gwendolyn, you are on garnish and quality control at the pass. Harper, you are on grill and fryer. I will expedite the tickets and handle the sauté station. For the next hour, the kitchen transformed from a reactive war zone into a proactive assembly line. I instituted a strict call and response system. When I called an order, Harper repeated it back, clear, calm, verified. I controlled the relentless pace, ensuring the hot food hit the pass exactly as the cold appetizers were cleared from the tables by the waitstaff. By 1930, the printer went quiet for the first time. The backlog was cleared. Then, disaster threatened. Harper's pan for the delicate Beurre Blanc sauce got too hot on the back burner, and the butter began to separate, breaking the fragile emulsion into a greasy, yellow mess. Chef, the sauce broke, Harper said, absolute panic flooding her voice. She reached for the pan to throw it out. Leave it. I stepped over instantly. I grabbed a small carton of heavy cream from the iced prep bath. I poured exactly 1 tablespoon of freezing cold cream into the broken sauce and handed Harper a wire whisk. Whisk, I directed, my voice steady. The cold fat will force the emulsion to bind back together. Harper whisked frantically, the metal scraping loudly against the pan. 10 seconds later, the sauce miraculously tightened, transforming back into a glossy, velvety coating that coated the back of a spoon perfectly. It's back, Harper gasped, staring at the pan in disbelief. Maintain your heat control, I said, returning to my sauté station without missing a beat. Scallops, walking in 2 minutes. Have a warm plate ready. I plated Julian's risotto, tapping the heavy base of the ceramic bowl against the counter to ensure the starchy, perfectly emulsified arborio rice spread into an even, flat circle. I laid the 3 seared scallops in a tight crescent at the center, their golden brown crusts catching the harsh overhead light, and slid the plate across the stainless steel pass to Gwendolyn. Wipe the rim, I instructed gently. A single fingerprint distracts the eye from the composition. Microgreens at exactly 12 o'clock. She wiped the pristine white porcelain with a clean, folded towel, her movements precise and deliberate. She placed the delicate green garnish exactly where I indicated. She looked like someone who had survived a brutal service and actually won. Table 4, she said quietly to the waiting runner. By 9 o'clock, the final dessert ticket was cleared. The kitchen was silent, save for the heavy hum of the exhaust hoods pulling the remaining ambient heat into the night air. Gwendolyn walked back through the swinging doors from the dining room. She was holding a small, leather-bound checkbook. She stopped at the end of the line. He paid his bill. And the verbal feedback to the server? I asked, meticulously wiping down my stainless steel station with a damp towel, removing every trace of grease. He told her the risotto was surprisingly competent. She let out a sudden laugh that sounded remarkably like a sob of pure relief, echoing in the quiet kitchen. For Julian, that's a glowing endorsement. He didn't find the dramatic collapse he was looking for. Because there was no collapse. I threw the dirty towel into the linen bin and dried my hands. I can't afford your hourly rate, Enzo, she added, tapping the checkbook against her palm, her expression turning serious. But I have to pay you for tonight. You saved us. The arrangement was professional courtesy, I stated, walking over to the office hook to grab my jacket. I didn't want a check. I wanted the satisfaction of a functioning system. Keep your capital. Use it to hire a permanent replacement. I pushed open the heavy back door, stepping out into the cool, damp night air of the alley. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull ache in my shoulders. Enzo, wait. She walked out after me. She didn't have her checkbook. In her hands, she held a small, insulated silver thermos. I noticed you drinking iced water all through the cooking class, she said, the alley perfectly quiet around us. But before class started, you were holding a cup from the corner cafe. Black tea. I made this while you were wiping down the line. Earl Grey. No sugar. I looked at the thermos. In my high-stakes world, people demanded perfection and high profit margins. No one ever anticipated what I physically needed. I reached out and took the thermos. The radiant heat seeped into my cold palm, grounding me instantly. Thank you, I said, my voice quiet. She smiled, a soft, authentic expression. Ensure Harper calibrates the fryers tomorrow morning. They are running 5 degrees too hot. I will, she said softly. The following Wednesday afternoon, the coastal city air was thick with humidity. I walked through the back alley delivery doors of the Copper Spoon to conduct the prep audit I had promised her at the community center. The kitchen was empty, the prep shift not scheduled to start for another hour. Gwendolyn was sitting in the small, cramped office near the rear exit, staring at a stack of vendor invoices. You actually came? She said, startled by the heavy sound of my boots on the tile. I stated my intention. I am following through. I walked past her office and directly toward the heavy stainless steel door of her walk-in refrigerator. Show me your inventory organization. She hurried after me, grabbing a clipboard. It's a little disorganized. I pulled the heavy handle. The blast of 34-degree air hit me. I stepped inside. Gwendolyn's taxonomy was a disaster. Raw poultry was stored on a mid-level wire shelf directly above fresh, uncovered produce. Delicate herbs were wilting in unsealed plastic bags, exposed to the harsh fan circulation. This is a cross-contamination hazard, I said, my voice echoing in the metallic enclosed space. I didn't raise my tone. I simply began moving heavy Lexan containers. I pulled a heavy flat of heirloom tomatoes that had been stacked perilously close to the main cooling fan. The freezing air was actively degrading the cell walls of the fruit, rendering the texture mealy. Tomatoes hold at room temperature until prepped, I stated, handing her the heavy flat. She took the heavy flat, her arms straining slightly under the weight, but she didn't complain. I'll move them to the dry storage rack immediately, she said, marking it on her clipboard. It was a simple correction, but it demonstrated a willingness to dismantle her own flawed systems to build better ones. Everything requires a label, a date, and a designated zone, I continued, pulling a roll of blue painter's tape and a Sharpie from my pocket. Protein on the bottom. Prepared sauces in the middle. Produce on top. First in, first out. No exceptions. I spent the next 20 minutes completely rebuilding her refrigerator logic. When we stepped out of the walk-in, the back door banged open. A vendor delivery driver wheeled a heavy hand truck inside, looking annoyed and rushed. Need a signature on these dairy boxes. Now. I'm double parked. Gwendolyn didn't flinch or look to me for help. She stood up, walked over, and checked the printed invoice against her clipboard. She quickly spotted a discrepancy in the butter weight, pulled a crushed carton from the top flat, and sent the driver back to his truck to correct the manifest before she signed anything. She handled the disruption flawlessly, protecting her bottom line. She walked back and sat down at the prep table just as Matteo knocked on the open back door frame, holding his phone out. Chef, you need to see this right now. It was Julian's blog. He praised the Friday risotto in the first paragraph, but the tone shifted rapidly into something malicious. However, a highly reliable source informed me that the kitchen was not run by Miss Peterson or her staff, but by a ringer brought in from across the street to save face. I challenged the Copper Spoon to recreate that exact flawless dinner service this Friday without any outside interference. If they fail, my original assessment stands. The bistro is a fraud. Julian was leveraging internet rumor to force a highly public failure. He was trapping her. He trapped me, Gwendolyn said, reading the screen over my shoulder, her voice hollowing out. If you cook for me again, he proves I'm a fraud. If you don't, Harper and I crash and burn on Friday night. I handed the phone back to Matteo and pulled out a metal stool, sitting across from her. Julian assumes your failure is inevitable because he equates operational leadership with a specific culinary title. He doesn't understand systems. He only understands theater. Enzo, I can't run that line alone for a full menu. Then we changed the menu. I pulled a blank sheet of printer paper from her office and took my pen from my pocket. We redefined the parameters of the service. You are going to pivot your entire model for Friday night. We institute a strict prix menu. 3 courses. No substitutions. No modifications. Gwendolyn sat up straighter, tracking the logic as I drew thick arrows between stations on the paper. If everyone is eating the exact same progression, Harper only has to focus on batch execution, not individual timing. Correct. You will limit the reservations to 40 covers total. It creates artificial scarcity, builds hype, and controls the physical volume. And you will run the pass. You managed your vendors flawlessly, organized your walk-in inventory today, and kept your staff calm under duress last week. You are a highly capable director. You just need the correct blueprint. I noticed her reaching for a pen to take notes, but it was completely out of ink, scratching uselessly against the paper. I silently handed her my own Sharpie, anticipating the failure of her tool. She took it, offering a small, grounded nod of thanks. I spent the next hour mapping out a foolproof, heavily prepped prix menu. Braised short rib, requiring only a reheat and a quick glaze during service. A chilled heirloom tomato soup, plated entirely in advance. We ran the food costs, ensuring her margins remained profitable. I cannot physically work your line this Friday, I told her, finalizing the prep schedule with clear, precise timestamps. Julian's trap depends on proving you need me. I will stay out. But if you follow this blueprint precisely, Julian's review will be rendered entirely irrelevant. She looked at the detailed notes covering the paper. She nodded, her resilience overriding her fear. Friday evening arrived with a heavy, suffocating tension. I was on the line at Lumina, expediting a high-volume, relentless service. The ticket printer chattered endlessly, a sound that usually centered me. But tonight, my mind kept calculating the operational timeline across the street. At 1,930, the main courses would drop at the Copper Spoon. At 2,000 hours, my phone vibrated intensely in my apron pocket. A text from Gwendolyn. Convection oven just threw a critical error code. It's dropping temperature fast. A dropping oven meant the braised short ribs wouldn't glaze properly. The sugars wouldn't caramelize. The entire main course timeline was threatened. I rapidly typed a response, my thumbs flying over the screen. Shift the ribs to the stovetop immediately. Use wide, shallow pans. Reduce the jus manually on medium-high heat. Constant basting. Do not crowd the pans. I stared at the screen, standing in the middle of my chaotic kitchen, waiting. 2 agonizing minutes passed. Switch to stovetop. Harper is basting. Glaze is thickening beautifully. Timing maintained. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. She hadn't panicked. She hadn't frozen. She had used the system and adapted to the failure. At 2,130 hours, my service finally slowed to a manageable crawl. I handed the heavy clipboard to Mateo. Hold the line. I'm stepping out. I walked out the back door. The alley separating our restaurants was dark, smelling strongly of imminent rain and hot pavement. I leaned against the damp brickwork, counting the seconds. The ambient hum of the city traffic felt distant, muted by the heavy brick walls. When the heavy metal door of the Copper Spoon finally swung open, the blast of hot, food-scented air hit the cool alley. Gwendolyn stepped out. Her white coat was battered, stained with dark eau jus. Her hands were trembling slightly from the sheer adrenaline dump, and her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat, but her spine was absolutely straight. She hadn't broken. I walked across the alley, stopping 3 feet away. She looked up at me. He ate every single bite, she whispered. Her voice rough from calling tickets all night. He tried to complain to the server about the lack of options, but the table next to him loudly praised the short rib, and he had to shut up. He paid the bill and left. The heavy, cold tension in my chest instantly released. The blueprint functioned. The blueprint was perfect. She pushed off the brick wall and walked toward me. She stopped right at the edge of my personal space. I read a lot, Enzo, she said quietly, the ambient noise of the city traffic fading into the background. I read these romance novels about men who swoop in and save the day, men who are loud and dramatic and fight the villains in the street with grand gestures. I stiffened slightly, uncomfortable with the abstract framing. I am a pragmatist. I deal in thermal transfer and ticket times. I know. She reached into her apron pocket. And that's exactly why those books aren't real. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the blueprint I had drawn for her. She held it up between us in the dim light. A man in a book fights a bully, she said, her voice unwavering. You sat down and taught me how to fight him myself. You didn't save my restaurant, Enzo. You gave me the tools to save it. My grip tightened on the folded blueprint. My shoulders unhooked for the first time in years. The metal air of the alley didn't feel like a countdown anymore. I'm better than any fiction, I stated, the words a concrete fact. I didn't reach out to grab her. I simply closed the final step between us, removing the physical distance. I reached out and gently took the folded blueprint from her hand, my calluses rough against her skin. You are, she agreed. You need a permanent head chef to maintain this standard, I said, my voice dropping low. My sous chef, Matteo, is ready to run his own kitchen. I will recommend him to you tomorrow morning. He executes my systems flawlessly. Gwendolyn blinked, processing the massive practical solution. You'd give me your best guy? I protect the things I respect. I carefully tucked the folded blueprint into my own pocket. The service is over. You are off the clock. Have you eaten today? She shook her head slowly. No, I haven't had time. My kitchen is closed, I said, offering my arm, presenting a united, highly practical front. But I have the master keys to the walk-in. Let's go make something off the menu. Gwendolyn slipped her arm through mine, her tension completely gone, trusting the plan entirely. Before we turned to leave, she reached back with her free hand and firmly taped a small, handwritten note over her back door lock for Harper to find tomorrow. Chef Enzo's blueprint. Our new standard. Lead the way, chef, she said. We walked back across the dark alley and entered the pristine quiet of Lumina. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my GM. Board loved the outreach photos. Lease meeting confirmed. I pocketed the phone, the final logistical variable secured. The main overheads were dimmed. I led her to the central prep island and pulled out a tall metal stool for her to sit on. I gathered fresh, handmade pasta, cracked black pepper, and aged pecorino romano, cacio e pepe, a dish of absolute, unforgiving simplicity. As I whisked the starchy water and cheese into a glossy emulsion, Matteo walked in from the locker room to grab his jacket. He stopped, noticing Gwendolyn sitting at the prep island while I cooked. He looked at the two of us, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face, and quietly slipped out the side door, leaving us the space. I plated the pasta in a warm ceramic bowl and set it on the stainless steel counter in front of her. She took a bite, closing her eyes as the heat and sharp pepper hit her palate. Her shoulders stopped shaking entirely. The exhaustion in her posture vanished, replaced by quiet contentment. I leaned against the counter opposite her, crossing my arms. Tomorrow, Matteo signs with you as head chef, I said quietly, locking the final piece of the operational puzzle into place. I stay at Lumina, but I'm on your menu as a consultant. On paper, Julian won't ever touch you again. She looked up from the bowl, her eyes bright, a smile pulling at her mouth. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small silver thermos, setting it on the counter next to the pasta. Black tea, Earl Grey. Acceptable? Next week, she would run a highly profitable, perfectly controlled prix night. There would be no operational chaos, no frantic ticket times, and absolutely no burned garlic. The smell in my own kitchen wasn't pure carbon anymore. It was sharp pepper and warm tea. I looked at the thermos, then at her. The chaos of my world finally finding its correct order. Accepted. The end. Closing thoughts. I learned that true strength isn't about taking over someone else's life to make yourself feel powerful. It's about providing the exact tools they need to stand on their own. Real love doesn't look like a dramatic rescue. It looks like patience, respect, and the quiet effort of building a functional life together. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.